The transmission wasn't just distorted, it was terrified, raw, the kind of fear that grips your throat even through static. It poured from the speakers in fractured cries, drenched in a desperation that could only come from those staring directly into the face of something unspeakable. On the command bridge of the Valiant Resolve, the crew stood frozen, transfixed by a signal they weren't supposed to hear, by voices that shouldn't have existed at all. The Valiant Resolve, last of Earth's long-range cruisers stationed in deep Accord space, hovered in orbit above Therac Prime, a shattered moon riddled with dead colonies, ancient mining scars, and now a dark ripple in the very fabric of space itself. It pulsed like a heartbeat, visible even against the void, as if something inside it was waiting, or waking. Captain Ilara Miles stood at the helm, surrounded by a crew who had bled and burned with her across 17 different star systems. Veterans of the Sargon sieges, survivors of the cruel Dominion ambush at Arcos Reach, hardened, weary, human. The rest of the Accord fleet, a dozen ships from 5-member civilizations, maintained formation far behind them, silent, cloaked, passive. Their orders were clear. Hold position, avoid engagement, and under no circumstance approach the anomaly. Not until the High Chancellor's Science Council finished their bureaucratic assessment. But Earth had seen this pattern before. Delay, debate, extinction. Ilara's neural HUD buzzed faintly as encrypted data packets streamed in from the Accord's central command. High Chancellor Asuvan's voice, perfectly modulated and devoid of urgency, filtered into her mind. All units remain at protocol distance. Therac space is under restricted observation. Do not interfere. Do not respond. She blinked the command. Away. Instead, she focused on the visuals forming on the primary holotable, swirling distortions around the black rift, gravitational anomalies pulling debris inward, and the wreckage of old colony stations orbiting like corpses in a watery grave. In the static, fragments of voice returned, human voices. Containment breached, we couldn't hold them. Help us, please. Then silence. Not the cold silence of space, but a void of sound, as if even echoes refused to return. Ilara turned to Lieutenant Rowe, her second-in-command, a hybrid with augment-grade implants and a mind as sharp as quantum steel. He looked shaken. Not by the message, but by the implications of disobeying a direct Accord order. "Captain," he said, low and tense, "we've been told to observe only. No contact, no investigation. That thing, it might be a Class X spatial fracture, or, worse, we breach proximity and the rest of the Accord will blacklist Earth for this." Ilara didn't answer right away. Her eyes lingered on the massive tear in reality ahead of them. It was unlike anything she had seen in 20 years of command. Not a natural phenomenon, not a collapse of folded space. It moved, slowly, deliberately, like it was watching. "What do we know about the last transmission from the Therac colony?" she finally asked. Rowe hesitated. "Official record says power grid failure followed by catastrophic reactor implosion. Nothing salvageable. And unofficially," he shifted his weight, eyes narrowing, "there were reports classified about an archaeotech dig site, precursor ruins, energy signatures predating recorded galactic history. But the science team vanished before any full report was made." Ilara stepped closer to the viewport. Stars glittered in the distance, but around the anomaly, light seemed to bend unnaturally, as if the universe itself wanted to look away. She remembered the early days of the Accord, when Earth was finally granted a seat at the table after decades of proving its worth. Humanity had been underestimated, dismissed as brash, emotional, too quick to leap before calculating the odds. But sometimes the odds didn't matter. Sometimes what mattered was doing the right thing when everyone else was too afraid to move. The bridge crew was silent, waiting for her decision. Ilara looked at each of them in turn, Anders at the helm, hands hovering over the thrusters. Calix, in tactical, running silent scans despite standing orders. Even the comms officer, Sarah, who had already rerouted the long-range dish without being asked. They were waiting for her to say the words. Not the official orders, her orders. She straightened. "Signal engineering," she said, her voice steady. "Strip back the encryption on that signal. I want a clean audio readout, full spectrum. I want to know what happened down there." "Captain," Rowe warned again, "this violates multiple interstellar codes. We'll be sanctioned. Possibly detained." "I'm not here for politics," she said, her voice like ice. "I'm here to protect lives." The engineering deck roared to life as the signal was run through deep clean algorithms and sonic reconstructs. And then, from the static, something cut through. "They're not machines. Not alive. Shifting. We tried to warn them. If anyone's out there, stop them from breaching the veil. They don't just consume. They overwrite." Then the message collapsed into a feedback howl that made the deck lights dim for half a second. Everyone stared at her. Even Rowe, and that's when she made her choice. "Launch the scouts," Ilara ordered. "Full spectral analysis of that rift, and prep the assault wing. I want every interceptor combat ready." "Captain, this is career suicide," Rowe whispered. She turned to him, not with anger, not with defiance, but with certainty. "If we don't act," she said softly, "there won't be a galaxy left to have careers in." Before we jump into this epic tale, subscribe to StarBound'S HFY for the most intense sci-fi battles, legendary warriors, and universe-shaking wars. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and join the fight. Outside, the valiant Resolve adjusted its trajectory. Engines burned blue as the great warship turned away from the rest of the Accord fleet and began its descent toward the anomaly. Ilara could see the reactions already flooding the encrypted comms channels: outrage from the Tervathi Admiralty, shocked silence from the Jirelians, cold threats from the Vanari High Council, and then the Chancellor's voice once more, crisp and sharp across all channels. "Human vessel Valiant Resolve, this is your final warning. Cease your approach. You are in violation of Accord standing orders. Return to formation immediately or face censure under interstellar law." Ilara tapped the comm interface. "Orders acknowledged," she said clearly, then muted the transmission. She looked out at the growing ripple in the stars, at the wound in space itself. Her pulse was steady, her mind clear. "Helm," she said, "full power. Take us in." And without another word, the valiant Resolve plunged into the shadow of Therak Prime, heading straight for the anomaly, alone. But not for long. The descent into the rift was slow, deliberate. The valiant Resolve moved like a ghost, its sleek hull cutting through the void with a precision that belied its size. Ilara stood at the command helm, her gaze fixed on the black, swirling mass ahead. The bridge was quiet, save for the occasional hum of the ship's systems and the soft flicker of lights as the crew went through their duties. Every eye was on her, waiting for the signal to act. Rowe stood behind her, his hand hovering over his neural interface, ready to activate the fleet-wide communication channel should the rest of the Accord fleet make a move. But for now, they were on their own. Humanity had always been on its own, and in that moment Ilara felt the weight of that reality more keenly than ever. "Approaching the event horizon," the helmsman called out. The words hung in the air, heavy with foreboding. The event horizon of a spatial anomaly wasn't like that of a black hole. It wasn't a place where nothing could escape. But as the valiant Resolve crept closer to the anomaly, the strange gravitational pull began to affect the ship's sensors, distorting them. "It's warping everything," Calix, the tactical officer, murmured. "The whole spectrum. The rift is like a prism shattering space itself." The holographic map flickered and wavered, showing an increasingly distorted view of the surrounding stars and planets. The anomaly, once a simple patch of darkness in the sky, now pulsed like the beating of a cosmic heart, unfathomable, alive. The ship's sensors were losing their accuracy, unable to track the constant fluctuations in space-time. Ilara felt her own perception stretch, as though she were being tugged in 1,000 directions at once. The gravitational waves reverberated through her body, a feeling not unlike being underwater. "Helm, hold course," she ordered, her voice steady despite the growing tension. "Rowe, send a message to the fleet. Tell them we're proceeding with the mission. If they want to stop us, they'll have to do it themselves." Rowe nodded, his face tense. "Aye, Captain." As he transmitted the message, Ilara's mind raced. The voices from the earlier transmission still echoed in her head, their warning, a warning that humanity had ignored for centuries, ringing louder with each passing moment. They don't just consume, they overwrite. She could still hear the faint terror in their words. It was the same terror she had felt when Earth had first encountered the strange alien entities that had begun appearing in the fringes of human space. At first, the humans had been overconfident, dismissing them as primitive, easily crushed by their superior technology. But one by one, the alien species had learned that humanity wasn't so easily defeated. But this was different. This was something older. The rift wasn't just a portal to another dimension. It was an entryway to something that existed long before any species had first crawled from their homeworlds. Something that had slumbered beneath the stars, waiting for the right moment to reawaken. And now humanity was about to stumble into it head first. "Captain," Calix's voice cut through her thoughts, his face grim. "We're getting another signal." Ilara turned toward him. He was staring at the tactical display, his hands moving quickly across the interface. "It's not like the last one," he said. "This one's different, it's coded." The crew gathered around, staring at the screen as the encrypted message began to decode in real time. For a moment, nothing but random symbols and noise filled the air. Then, slowly, the garbled words began to form. "The time has come. The veil must be torn." The message paused. Then the rest of the transmission became clear. "No force can stop it now. The gatekeeper is dead. The pattern is complete." The hairs on the back of Ilara's neck stood on end. It was a message from someone, or something, that had known of the rift for far longer than they had. The gatekeeper, what could that mean, and what pattern was being completed? The questions gnawed at her, but there was no time to process them. "If you hear this, you have no choice. You will face the reckoning. The ancient ones will return, and there will be no mercy." And then, just as quickly as it had come, the transmission cut off, leaving the crew in stunned silence. Ilara took a deep breath, her hands steady on the console. "Ro," she said, her voice cool. "Get us closer. Full sensor sweep. Calix, I want every tactical reading you can get." "Aye, Captain," Ro replied, his voice taut with apprehension. The valiant resolve moved forward, slowly edging, closer to the rift. Outside the viewport, the anomaly seemed to pulse and writhe, its shape shifting as though it were alive, almost like a living organism breathing in the depths of space. The stars around it were bent, distorted by the gravitational forces emanating from the rift. It wasn't just a spatial anomaly. It was a force, an intelligence older than the galaxy itself. Suddenly a flash of light erupted from the rift, bright, blinding, and so intense that the bridge lights dimmed in response. The valiant resolve shook violently as shockwaves reverberated through the ship's hull. Systems flickered. The crew stumbled as the force of the wave hit them. Ilara gripped the console, heart racing as the ship's internal alarms blared. "Report!" she shouted. "We've lost primary power to the aft stabilizers," Rose said, his voice strained. "Engines are still functional, but we're being pulled in." Ilara's mind raced. They were too close. This wasn't just some anomaly. It was a gravitational force that could rip a ship apart if it wasn't careful. "Reinforce the stabilizers. Full thrusters divert power from secondary systems," she barked. "Helm, get us out of here, now!" But the ship wasn't responding. It was as if the rift itself had locked onto them, refusing to let go. The gravity well of the anomaly had strengthened exponentially in a matter of seconds, pulling them in faster than any ship could manage. It wasn't just a breach in space-time anymore. It was alive. The crew scrambled, their faces filled with fear and uncertainty. Calix worked feverishly at the tactical station, trying to adjust the ship's trajectory, but every time he made an adjustment, the ship jerked violently as if the rift were pushing back. The anomaly was rewriting their position in real time. "Ro," Ilara shouted, "we need to make it out of here now." But Ro was already way ahead of her. His fingers danced over his console, a flash of realization dawning on him. He looked up at Ilara, his eyes wide with shock. "Captain," he said, his voice low, "we're not going to make it out. Not unless we break protocol." Ilara's mind whirled as the reality set in. She knew what Ro was suggesting, and she knew that this was the moment where everything would either fall apart or be saved. "Do it," she said firmly. Ro didn't. hesitate. The valiant Resolve lurched forward, its engines roaring to life with an intensity that rattled the entire ship. The forward thrusters burned bright, pushing the ship directly toward the heart of the rift. Ilara's breath caught in her throat as the ship entered the rift's threshold, and in that moment she understood. There was no turning back. Time fractured as the valiant Resolve plunged into the rift. It felt like the very laws of physics were being rewritten around them. Gravity twisted and stretched like an elastic band, space bending and folding with chaotic abandon. The stars outside the viewport flickered, warped beyond recognition, as though they were nothing more than distant ghosts, their lights bending and shattering like fragile glass. Ilara braced, herself against the console, her knuckles white from gripping the metal so tightly. The ship groaned as if in protest, its hull protesting the forces at play, but the valiant Resolve held together. Barely. She could feel the heat building from the ship's systems as they fought against the strain of the rift's gravitational pull. Inside the ship, every movement felt sluggish, as though they were moving underwater. "Shields holding at 60%, Rowe reported, his voice tense but steady. "We're holding, but barely. The rift is pushing back, Captain." Ilara's gaze remained fixed ahead, watching the shimmering maw of the rift devour the space in front of them. The chaotic patterns in the surrounding stars had become nearly impossible to track. It was as if they were no longer in any known part of the galaxy. They were somewhere else entirely, a place where time and space were meaningless. "What's the status on the fleet?" Ilara asked, forcing the question. Through gritted teeth. They couldn't afford to be distracted now. They needed to know where the rest of the Accord fleet was, but with the rift's interference, their sensors were as unreliable as a broken compass. The fleet, if it had even managed to follow them, was now lost in the same dark expanse. "We've lost contact," Calix said, his voice tight. "We can't reach them. The distortion is too great." They may have abandoned the pursuit. A cold knot of dread settled in Ilara's stomach. The Accord fleet had been her backup, her insurance. If they were gone, then it was up to them, just the valiant Resolve, and a crew of humans caught in the heart of the unknown. "We're not alone," Calix muttered. He had been scanning the ship's external sensors despite the interference, his eyes fixed on a flickering display. "I'm reading something huge, something massive, just outside the event horizon." Ilara's eyes snapped to the screen. There in the depths of the rift, something was moving, something impossibly large and alien. Its shape was obscured, hidden by the swirling distortions in the rift, but the sheer scale of it was undeniable. It moved with an eerie, deliberate grace, like a shadow stretching across the fabric of space itself. The presence was ancient, colossal. "It's a ship?" Rowe asked, his voice barely a whisper. It didn't seem possible. A ship, something, that vast, within the rift? It defied everything they understood about space and physics. "Not a ship," Ilara said, her voice calm, though the chill creeping down her spine betrayed her. "It's something else, something far older." Suddenly, the valiant Resolve jerked violently again, as though an invisible hand had seized hold of them. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. They were being dragged deeper into the rift, further, toward whatever had just revealed itself. The ship trembled under the force of an unseen force, its systems straining against the overwhelming pressure. "Captain," Rowe said, his voice sharp with panic, "we've lost full control. The rift's pull is too strong. We're being drawn in fast." There was a moment of quiet, tense hesitation. Ilara knew that this was no longer a mission. It wasn't just about survival. It was about understanding. Humanity had always faced the unknown, but this was something that no one could have anticipated. The galaxy itself was unraveling around them, and now they were tangled in its threads. "Prepare the pulse cannon," Ilara ordered suddenly, her voice hardening with resolve. The crew froze for a moment, startled by the order. The pulse cannon was a weapon meant for last resort engagements, used only when the very survival of the fleet was at stake. It was a weapon that bent the fabric of space-time in a controlled, devastating burst of energy. A weapon that could tear apart even the largest ships in an instant. It was meant to cut through the fabric of reality itself. "Captain, we can't," Calix protested, his fingers hovering nervously over the tactical controls. "The rift's interference will make it unpredictable." We'll tear apart ourselves just as easily as anything else. Ilara's jaw clenched, her decision made. We have no choice. That thing out there, she motioned toward the growing shadow in the rift, is a threat. It might not be alive, but it's capable of something. We need to fight back. Azam? The crew scrambled to activate the pulse cannon. The ship shuddered again. This time a slow, deliberate shaking, like the deep vibration of an ancient machine coming to life. The lights flickered and dimmed, casting shadows across the bridge. Ilara's pulse quickened. This was it. This was where the universe was truly testing them. The shadow outside the viewport began to take form, solidifying before their eyes. What had once been a vague outline was now a gargantuan structure, a thing that transcended the very concept of a ship. It was a relic, ancient beyond reckoning, covered in layers of what seemed to be alien runes or symbols, shimmering and pulsating with an eerie glow. Its surface was dark like obsidian, yet alive with subtle movements as though it were breathing. Massive tendrils of energy arced across its surface, bending the space around them with unfathomable force. The very air seemed to hum with the presence of it. "What the hell is that thing?" Ro whispered, his face drained of color. "It's not a ship," Ilara replied, her eyes locked on the entity, her mind racing. "It's a guardian, a gatekeeper." The truth struck her with bone-chilling clarity. This was no simple entity. This was the thing that had been guarding the rift, the thing that had ensured the collapse of every civilization that had ventured too close. And now, for reasons unknown, it had awakened, and it was heading straight for them. "Target locked," Calix reported. The pulse cannon was primed, the energy building to a blinding intensity. Ilara's hands shook, but her mind was clear. "Firing on my mark," she said, her voice like ice. The ship trembled violently as the pulse cannon's energy surged through it, a massive wave of destructive power gathering within the ship's core. The weapon was nearly ready, and then, as if sensing their intent, the ancient guardian reacted. The very space around it flickered, warping and twisting, as though the fabric of reality itself was being torn apart. A shockwave of immense force slammed into the valiant resolve, throwing the crew to the ground, the ship's shields flaring in response. The pain was instantaneous, brutal, yet through the haze of disorientation, Ilara heard Calix's voice, barely audible. "Targeting, locked. Captain, if we fire now..." She didn't need to hear more. With a single motion, she slammed her hand down on the firing button. The pulse cannon discharged with the fury of a dying star. The pulse cannon's discharge felt like an eternity, time slowing as the beam of concentrated energy surged through the rift. It was a brilliant, searing light, a blinding streak of raw power that tore through space with the sound of a thunderclap. But it was only the beginning. For a moment, it seemed as though the very universe held its breath. Then the beam collided with the ancient guardian. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then everything happened. The force of the impact shattered space itself. The very fabric of reality convulsed, spiraling into chaos as the rift reacted violently to the cannon's disruptive power. A wave of energy exploded outward, like a sunburst, of chaotic, swirling light. The valiant resolve was flung back by the shockwave, its hull screeching in protest as the energy slammed against it. Ilara was thrown violently against her harness, her vision blurring from the sheer force of the explosion. Her breath was stolen in an instant, and for a moment she wondered if this was it, that they had failed, that this was the end. But the ship held. The valiant resolve bucked and groaned, but it didn't break. Through the chaos, Ilara heard Ro's voice crackling over the comms, his voice raw with panic. "Shields are down. Hull integrity at 30%. We're..." A deep rumble cut him off, as if the rift itself had grown angry. Ilara's mind raced. Their pulse cannon had done something. They had touched the Guardian, shaken it, but at what cost? They couldn't last much longer like this. They had made a desperate gamble, but now the consequences were unfolding before their eyes. The ancient ship, the Guardian, hadn't been destroyed. Instead, it had absorbed the pulse cannon's energy, and now it was twisting, evolving. The light around it shifted, flickering between brilliant white and dark, oppressive black. The Guardian's surface rippled as though it were alive, a web of energy coursing through its surface. Ilara's heart pounded as she realized that what they had awakened was not merely a relic, it was a sentient force. Something beyond the comprehension of any civilization, ancient or new. "We've made it worse," Calix muttered, his voice shaky as he watched the increasingly erratic movements of the Guardian. "It's evolving, adapting. Focus, Calix." Ilara snapped, her voice harsh with the weight of command. Her mind was still racing, but she knew that if they didn't act quickly, they'd be nothing more than a footnote in the galaxy's history, an ill-fated attempt to tamper with forces beyond their understanding. "Give me something, anything." Tense silence followed as the crew scrambled to make sense of the chaos. The Guardian had begun to emanate pulses of strange energy, arcs of it shooting out from its surface, splintering the very air around it. Space itself began to twist in unnatural ways, distortions of light and matter bending as though the ship were rewriting the laws of physics in its wake. "We need to get out of here," Ro said urgently. "We're not equipped to fight something like that." Ilara's eyes narrowed as she watched the alien ship grow. It wasn't just a matter of survival now. The Guardian was an ancient weapon, a tool designed to protect the rift. It was its purpose. If they didn't stop it, the rift would destabilize completely, and they'd be trapped in a collapsing universe of fractured time and space. Worse, still they would have paved the way for whatever horrors lay beyond the rift to enter their reality. "No," Ilara said quietly, more to herself than to anyone else. "We can't run. We won't run. We fight." She slammed her fist onto the tactical console, sending a burst of commands to the ship's systems. The crew had always joked that the valiant resolve was a testament to humanity's ingenuity, cobbled together from old tech, scavenged resources and sheer will. But now, in this moment, the ship was their lifeline, and she would squeeze every ounce of power from it. "Ro," she called, "prepare the secondary systems, override everything. We're going to turn the rift against it." The crew stared at her, stunned. "What do you mean?" Calix asked, his voice unsure but laced with hope. Could they actually reverse the damage they'd caused? Could they force the rift to work for them? "We've learned enough," Ilara said, her voice a low, determined growl. "The rift's energy is chaotic, but it's not random. It's a force, a pattern. We've seen how it reacts to our pulse cannon. Now we need to use that. We're going to amplify the rift's core energy, overload it. If we're lucky, it will destabilize the Guardian." Calix's eyes widened as the implications of what she was suggesting hit him. "You're talking about using the ship's core to feed the rift, to make it unstable enough to do what? Destroy it?" "Exactly," Ilara said. "We overload the rift itself with energy. We don't need to defeat the Guardian. We need to collapse the rift. It'll neutralize the Guardian's power and stop it from spreading." "But the ship," Calix started, his voice laced with disbelief. "The ship will survive," Ilara cut him off. "I trust it. We're humans. We've been underestimated. Our entire lives. This is our time to show the galaxy what we're made of." The crew hesitated for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on them. This was madness. Absolute insanity. They were about to take a ship on the brink of destruction and use it to try and control one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. But something in the way Ilara spoke made them believe. She wasn't just leading them, she was commanding them. And so they followed. "Engaging secondary power systems," Ro said, his voice steady, a hint of uncertainty masking his admiration. The ship's systems hummed to life as energy flowed through every conduit. The valiant resolve had never been meant for this kind of task, but in the face of extinction, the crew had nothing to lose. Ilara's eyes locked on the growing silhouette of the Guardian as it continued to stretch across the rift, a dark silhouette against the flickering light of the collapsing universe. For a moment, there was silence. The tension was unbearable. Then, with a deep, guttural hum, the valiant resolve fired. The core energy of the ship surged, pouring its life force into the rift. The Guardian shuddered as the rift's energies fluctuated, ripples of chaos spreading outward, like a stone dropped into still water. The energy was too much. It was pushing the rift beyond its limits. And then, the rift exploded. The universe held its breath. For an instant, time seemed to fracture, splintering like shattered glass. The rift, once a silent, ominous tear in the fabric of space, erupted in a cataclysmic wave of raw energy. A deep, resonating boom shook the valiant Resolve, reverberating through its hull as if the ship itself were a living thing, caught in the throes of the universe's death throes. The crew braced themselves, unable to do anything but wait for the storm to pass. The energy that surged outward was not just destructive, it was beautiful in its terror. Tendrils of light danced in the vacuum of space, stretching and twisting with the force of 1,000 storms. The colors were like nothing the human eye had ever seen, shifting iridescent hues of blue, purple, and green, flashing like fire, leaving trails of after-images in their wake. It was as if the rift itself had exploded in a fit of final defiance, a massive pulse of pure, unadulterated chaos. Then, just as quickly as it had begun, the eruption stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating. Nothing, no light, no sound. Just emptiness. Ilara blinked against the after-effects of the explosion, her vision swimming as her senses struggled to recalibrate. Was it over? Had they won? Her mind screamed at her to focus, to assess the damage, to understand what had just happened. But all she could do was stare out into the vastness of space where the rift once stood, gone. Where the Guardian once loomed, nothing remained. What happened? Calix's voice came, ragged, breaking the silence. His disbelief echoed in the stillness, even as the question was on everyone's lips. Had they truly done it? Had they closed the rift? "Ilara," Ro called, his voice tight with uncertainty. "The Guardian, it's gone." It was true, the massive ancient ship, the Cosmic Guardian, the sentinel that had defended the rift for millennia, had vanished. The rift itself was sealed, no longer pulsing with otherworldly energy. The chaos was gone, replaced by the eerie calm of deep space. But the cost of victory weighed heavily on them all. Their ship groaned beneath them, the hull battered by the explosion, the outer edges of the valiant Resolve scorched and blackened by the surging energy. Systems flickered in and out, their power fluctuating wildly, as the ship's structure fought to hold itself together. "Status report," Ilara said, her voice low and commanding despite the exhaustion that weighed on her chest. "Shields are down. We've lost propulsion and most of the secondary systems are offline," Ro replied, his voice tight with strain. "But we're alive. We're still here." Ilara nodded slowly. "Barely. But we did it." For a moment there was a silence among the crew, a shared realization settling over them. They had faced the impossible, stood up against an ancient force far beyond anything they had ever encountered, and survived. The odds had been stacked against them, the consequences of failure far too great to comprehend. But they had defied the universe's expectations and saved not only their own lives, but countless others as well. The rift was closed. The galaxy had been spared from an unimaginable fate. Yet even as relief flooded Ilara's veins, there was a strange, gnawing feeling in the pit of her stomach. They had succeeded, but at what cost? The valiant Resolve was barely functioning, and they were stranded, floating in the void of space with no way to contact their allies, no way to escape. Their gamble had paid off, but only just. They had no idea what the fallout from this moment would be. Would their victory be remembered as a desperate, heroic act, or as a dangerous, reckless mistake? "The galaxy won't forget this," Ilara said, as much to herself as to her crew. Her eyes locked on the distant stars beyond the viewport. "But we won't let them forget how we did it, how we saved them." Calix, ever the pragmatic one, hesitated before speaking. "You know, the rift was only a symptom. The real enemy, the force behind the Guardian, is still out there, somewhere." Ro's eyes met Ilara's, his expression darkening with understanding. "The galaxy's just one step away from another war." Ilara nodded solemnly. "Yes, but we've shown them what humanity is capable of. We're not just survivors, we're warriors, and we fight no matter the odds." The silence that followed was profound, each of them processing the weight of what they had accomplished. They had been up against forces that no one, not even the most advanced alien species, had truly understood. They had faced the rift, a tear in space-time, and they had won. But the victory came with a price a price that perhaps they wouldn't fully understand until much later. Ilara turned her gaze to the stars once more, her hand resting on the console, as she silently swore that humanity would not be forgotten. This battle had been theirs, and with it they had carved a new path for the galaxy, a path where no one could underestimate them again. And then, as if in response to the silence, a crackling noise came over the comms, a distant signal. Ilara froze. Was it a distress call, a message from the fleet? Her heart raced. Are we hearing this? Calix asked, his voice a whisper of disbelief. Ilara leaned forward, tuning the ship's systems to the strange signal, her breath caught in her throat. The message, barely audible, was clear. Humanity, you have changed the galaxy, and we are watching. Her eyes widened, heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. The words were chilling, but they were also a promise. Humanity had just taken its first real steps into the galactic stage, not as mere survivors, but as a force to be reckoned with. The crew shared a glance, understanding dawning in their eyes. They had set something in motion. They had opened a door. And now there was no turning back. The story concludes here, but with a galaxy full of new questions and challenges. Humanity had defied the odds. Now it was time to see what came next. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, share, and comment below. What do you think is in store for humanity in the galaxy's future? What new adventures do you think Ilara and her crew will face? Let us know your thoughts. Your opinions could shape the next chapter.